McDonald, joined by Grant Paulsen for 106.7 Down the Fan. We're doing a drop-in on all the divisional rival for the Eagles since it is scheduled release week, and we will see the Commanders twice. And don't forget, Eagles, that's the Commanders were one of the only three teams until the Super Bowl stuck an L on the Eagles. They came to Philadelphia and won last year. Grant Paulsen talks Redskin football all the time on 106.7 The Fan down there in D.C. So how's your offseason gone, Grant?
It's going well for me. Better, I would say, maybe than what I was hoping Washington's was going to shape up to be. They just haven't been that active. You know, you finish the way that they did. You're going into the fourth year of a regime with Ron Rivera and this front office he put together. He runs the whole thing in a coach-centric approach. He's the GM, the VP football ops. But they've got a GM in Martin Mayhew, and they've got a higher up in Marty Herney, who came over with Rivera from Carolina. And I kind of thought they would be making moves as if their jobs depended on it, because they're going into a gotta-have-it show-me season. And it's been very quiet and conservative, and that's what this front office is. They're not an aggressive bunch.
By the way, Grant, before we get in, I want to congratulate you. I was on Barrett Sports Media, and number one in the time slot, 2 to 6:30, Grant and Danny. I don't think there's any truth to the rumors that my two appearances put you over the top last year. But
well, we saw a spike. We did when we went back and we looked at the segments. We did see a spike.
But congratulations!
Thank you very much.
Congratulations on that. Now, from Washington's perspective, I want to talk about the quarterback room, because I thought you tweeted something interesting there. But before I get there, we got to talk about Josh Harris. And, you know, obviously we're familiar with him here in Philadelphia from the 76ers, but it's a more complicated deal from all reports than typical with these NFL sort of ownership changes. You know, the Walton family, David Tepper, financially well-heeled, a lot of debt in this particular. And we all know in Washington, they want to get away from Daniel Snyder. Any way the wheels fall off of this thing, do you think?
It doesn't look like it. I mean, the NFL's really aggressively trying to make it happen. The timeline's been expedited. And all signs have pointed to Dan Selling for an extended period of time. They cleared out their offices. They haven't been around the facility. He stopped going to games at the end of the season, which is, you know, just hard to fathom considering how involved and overly involved he's been through the years. Not only are they not at the facility, they're rarely in the country. And I say they, meaning him and his wife at this point. They've got a place in London, and, you know, we've got fans that track their Jets daily, and they're constantly in Europe and never really around not only Northern Virginia, but where the team trains, but they're rarely in America. You add all that up, and the fact that for the first time, and I can remember, I mean, he was completely not involved during the draft. Like, not only not in the draft room, but he wasn't even on a video call from his yacht. It appears like he is done and he is out. So then the question is not necessarily if someone's buying this team, but when. You know, the only legitimate suitor at this point at the $6 billion threshold, as you've mentioned, is a team of people led by Josh Harris. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of billionaires. I think this is the new way to buy teams, because teams are just getting too expensive for individual people to buy. I mean, a year ago, you know, the Walmart folks, the Waltons, you know, they bought the Broncos for about $4.5 billion, and that was kind of a new high water mark. And now you fast forward 13 months or whatever it's been, not even, and Washington's going to be sold for a little over $6 billion, a record in North America for a team. So there's only a very small number of people who can afford to buy a team by themselves at $6 billion. When David Tepper bought Carolina, it was very rich. That was only a handful of years ago. It was a $2 billion purchase. You know, we're at 3 times that. You need to have 30% of the money liquid to be able to, basically like a down payment on your house. So it's really, really hard for one person, even very rich people, unless Elon Musk or
I was going to say, you got Bezos and you got Musk, and then that's it.
Bezos.
It's combination. It's tag team efforts from there on in, Greg.
There's a handful of people, right, in the country, all the names that we talk about all the time of the richest people. So what's going to happen now is, long story short, your Josh Harris types, who's worth $6 billion himself, is going to get a someone to go in with him. In this case, it's a guy named Mitchell Rales, who's got DC ties, who's worth about $6 billion as well. And then they've got a team of about 13 or so other people. I mean, this is between a 15 and 18 person ownership group. Harris is going to own the minimum allowed to be a majority owner at 30%. So I think people hear majority owner, they think he owns 51% of the team.
Yeah.
Not the case.
Yeah.
He'll own 30% of the team. Mitchell Rales will own 12%. And Magic Johnson's the third biggest bidder here, believe it or not, which is just awesome for a former athlete to have done so well and such a cool thing. He's going to own 4% of this team. So the three of those guys, it's known as the Harris Rales Magic Group, still only own 46%. The other 54% are coming from these other people. We've heard a name of a guy who's worth $12 billion. We've heard the former CEO of Google, who's worth $20 billion, are involved in this. So I think it's going to happen. I think there's going to be major movement here before the end of the month at the owners' meetings when they get back together in Phoenix. And then we'll see kind of when everything goes final. But my guess is Josh Harris has taken over ownership of this team, certainly before the start of the season.
All right, so you're on record as saying you're a little disappointed in this offseason because they haven't done much. They haven't been aggressive. It may be handicapped because of the ongoing sale. When are they going to get to a point where all right, new ownership's in place. Now we can go forward. Now we can get it. Now we can try and get the team better. It's not happening before the year starts, is it, Grant?
No, it doesn't look like it. Not this offseason. I will say I don't believe they were that influenced in their player acquisition this offseason by the sale. I really don't. When they wanted to do things, they did it. They re-signed Daron Payne for over $20 million a year, their defensive tackle at 11 sacks last year. That's a massive commitment. That was a contract that goes for the next few seasons. If they were hindered or not allowed to spend, or if Dan Snyder was saying, I'm not adding any money to my bottom line, pretty easily, they could have not been able to do that. What they did, and there was a report, and I thought this was interesting, on that deal and some of the free agency deals that they signed, they committed to paying signing bonuses rather than in the first 30 days, which is the normal way of the league, to doing it down the road, like a few months later. And I think they did that because they're going to have the new owners make those payments and not Dan Snyder, very likely. So that's one way they got around it. But here's the deal, Jody Mack. You and I have talked mostly baseball for a lot of years and now a lot of other stuff, right? I just don't see ball the same way these guys do. I just don't. Doesn't mean I'm smarter. They're smarter than I am. They're a GM. They're a team vice president, whatever. I'm not telling you I'm smarter, but we look at, a picture and we see two different things. I believe in today's NFL, you need to be aggressive. You need to be willing to make moves. You need to, this is not we're not cooking with crock pots anymore. We are cooking with microwaves in today's NFL. Howie Roseman during a draft says, hey, we got a pretty good group. I just drafted Devontae Smith, or I got a chance to do this. I'm going to trade for A.J. Brown anyway. You know what I'm saying? You got a decent running back room. You like okay, but you're still going to go out and get sweat. These guys just don't do it that way. They are not the go get Matt Stafford, win the Super Bowl, land Tom Brady, win the Super Bowl front office. So I say all that to tell you that they rolled with Sam Howell at the beginning of the offseason, which I think stunned a lot of people. They meant it when they said they liked him. I've been screaming it into a megaphone. They were going to keep him as their QB1. National people just couldn't believe it, but that was always going to happen. What I did think, though, is because he is I think it's like the 63rd highest paid quarterback in the league this year, they were going to invest more money in their offensive line. And they kind of went cheap with their offensive line upgrades. They didn't do enough. I thought maybe they'd go out a tight end and spend some money. They didn't do that. So they spent a lot on their D-line again and re-upping with Daron Payne. They brought in a very mediocre free agent class. They have a new linebacker, kind of a downgrade at the linebacker position. And like I heard you guys talking about the Eagles, they kind of devalue off-ball linebacker. They use two at a time. They're mostly going to use 5 DBs, which is the way of the league now. So teams just don't spend or use the same on linebacker as they used to. So they went and got Cody Barton for $3 million from Seattle. They brought in Nick Gates from the Giants, who's bounced around center and guard. He's going to start at center for them. They signed Andrew Wiley, who gave up 9 sacks last year for the Chiefs, started in the Super Bowl. He's probably going to be their right tackle. And frankly, they're hoping that the upgrade of going to Sam Howell from Taylor Heineke and the upgrade of going to Eric Bieniemy from Scott Turner, an offensive coordinator, are going to basically get them over the top in terms of improving this year.
You mentioned, and I agree with you, Grant, for the most part, you got to be a little bit more aggressive. I guess there's been sort of you guys talk baseball a lot, more of a baseball, basketball mentality with the newer GMs to be more willing to go outside the box. Go back 20 years ago, everybody was so traditional. They didn't want to hear about trades or anything of that nature. The game's changed a lot. What would have been splashy and was getting Andrew Luck to come out of retirement. Where the heck did that come from?
Yeah, how about that? And that wasn't even based on a report of this offseason, obviously. That was a year ago.
Yeah.
So I think what happened on that is they were trying at the time 1 year ago to make it known that they were overturning every stone. And essentially, they wanted people to know how hard they were working. So they would say things like, we've contacted all 31 teams trying to trade for quarterbacks, which A, is probably not true because it's a waste of time to call the Chiefs and ask if Patrick Mahomes is available.
Yeah.
And B, if you did that, that's stupid. Let's face it. You should just call the teams that have guys that are fits. And so, but they kept saying, and it kept being reported via ESPN last year, they're contacting all 31 teams. And I think as part of trying to, show their work and prove how hard they were working to get a quarterback, and they eventually, as you guys well know in Philly, settled on Carson Wentz and made the trade and gave up 2 third-round picks for him. It would have been 1 second-round pick as well had he not have gotten hurt and missed time last year. They said, we even reached out on Andrew Luck. And I think it was lost in translation and the reporting perhaps. And a buddy of mine who's very, very good did the reporting. But it was originally written, it sounds like, as they called Andrew Luck. I don't believe they actually called Andrew Luck, from what I can gather, or even Luck's agent. I think they probably asked the Colts or asked around, is Andrew Luck interested in playing football again? If he is he interested in leaving Indianapolis? And I'll bet that conversation was a few seconds long. So, look, the NFL's maybe going to look into it. The Colts want them to. I just don't think anything's going to come out of that.
All right, so this offseason, not as many phone calls because they committed themselves to Sam Howell as QB1, but they brought in QB2, JAKIB Brissette, and if Howell doesn't look great in camp, because they were as committed to Howell as they were to the offseason, how slow or quick will be the decision? Yeah, no, our backup is better than our starting quarterback. How would the process of moving from you're young, we believe in this kid, despite the fact that nobody else does, QB, to the been around the block, been with a bunch of teams, isn't really great, but isn't bad either. How does that quarterback decision come down this year?
So there's 2 answers here. I think there's how they think, and then there's what I think. So let's go with them first. I mean, I do believe, my co-host, for the record, fears that they're going to have a very quick leash for Sam Howell and that JAKIB Brissett's going to start more games this year. I think that's outrageous, and I don't believe that at all. I think the leash will be pretty long. I mean, you essentially are starting a rookie, and it's a rookie they like that has some upside. I think he's going to get some wiggle room, and they'll go to Brissette if and when Howell proves that he definitively can't do it. I think it's going to take, really bad interceptions, not seeing the field. They've lost 3 or 4 in a row because of quarterback play, not because the team's losing, but because he is holding them back in a detriment. It's going to take Eric Bieniemy going into Ron Rivera's office and saying, this guy's got to be benched. I can't do this anymore. I really don't think that's that realistic, frankly. I believe personally, now this is my own thought, the only way JAKIB Brissette should start a game is if Sam Howell is hurt. Because I got to be honest with you, if I am taking over this team as an owner and I'm looking at Ron Rivera and Marty, the Marty Party, Hurney and Mayhew here.
Mayhew, yeah.
Yeah, and they tell me, hey, we just finished our 4th season and we were by choice starting JAKIB Brissette. Then I would say, hey, that's awesome. Good for you guys. There's the door.
Clean out your office.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Give me your key card. And it's not meant to be disrespectful to JAKIB Brissette, but think about what I just said. You have been here for 4 years, and you chose to not only bring in Brissette as the only competition for Howell, but then you chose to start him over Howell, this career backup who is a low-end starter, high-end backup. He, to me, is a lot like, I would say, an upgrade from, but similar to what they had in Taylor Heineke the last couple of years in terms of caliber of quarterback. You should be out of that bucket at this point. So that's their own decision. You went and got him. You played him. That's fireable as far as I'm concerned in the 4th year of a regime, barring winning like 10 games and being in the playoffs with him managing the game. And I'll say Brissette, to your point, Jody Mack, I mean, he was at times really good. And for the most part, very solid for the Browns last year. I think he's an excellent backup. He's the perfect fit.
Yeah.
But
very good backup.
Swim with Sam Howell. And for that reason, they better give him a long leash, because the only way forward for them is if Sam Howell is the guy into 2024 and they ascended offensively and looked like a team that could be a playoff team. And honestly, a lot of people around here, and I agree with this, feel like to survive, this group needs to make the playoffs this year.
All right, so let me give you a hypothetical, and thank you for letting me in, John. Sam Howell gets out 1-6. Sorry, it just doesn't work out, and they're a bad football team, and it looks like, we put our eggs in the wrong basket. They go to JAKIB Brissette, and he loses his first 3 games, and the Commanders are 1-9. Is it Tankapalooza to get their hands on either the USC quarterback or the North Carolina quarterback? Would they even go back to North Carolina to get May after Sam Howell spit the bed this year? How does the season play out if halfway through you've got 1 win and neither one of the quarterbacks are getting the job done?
Yeah, I mean, that's the plains gone into the mountain stuff, right? At that point, yes. I mean, first of all the people we're talking about are out of their jobs at year's end.
Right. Yes. Yes.
In fact, I mean, Rivera's probably, if they're in this hypothetical, you're saying like 1-7, 1-8 or whatever, he's probably fired in season, I would imagine.
Who would be the coach? Who would they elevate on the staff if that were
Eric Bieniemy, baby?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, that's right. Oh, I forgot about Bieniemy. Good call, John.
Probably Bieniemy, although I will tell you, I mean, he has the assistant head coach title. Jack Del Rio, their D coordinator, has been a head coach before.
Yeah, true, too.
You can argue has better results as a head coach than Rivera does in his career. And Del Rio, when Rivera was dealing, unfortunately, with some cancer scares and things a couple of years ago, was the guy kind of running the building. Now, having said that, to get Bieniemy here, they had to give him the AHC title. So I would guess it would be Bieniemy. He'd get a shot.
Don't sleep on Juan Castillo. I think he's down there, Grant.
Yes, he is. They move him around. He's Ron's buddy, kind of position to position, whatever they need.
That's a joke to Eagles fans, obviously.
Well, he is. He's very much here. He's coached both sides of the ball, I think, at this point. Tight ends and low line.
Oh, yeah. He was the defensive coordinator here. He went from offensive line coach to defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Maybe Andy Reid's greatest mistake.
Well, Ron's still going to the well. But, so long story short, we don't know a lot about Josh Harris here. But just looking at the Philadelphia process, literally and figuratively, I would believe that he would have the vision, which this organization has lacked for a long time, to say, all right, this year is lost. Like, let's try to, I don't care about this battle. We're losing this battle. Let's try to win the war. And to prioritize the future, people can say tanking, it's a negative connotation. It's just called roster building as far as I'm concerned. Let's do what we got to do to be at the top of the draft board. So it doesn't mean players don't try, but yeah, you blow out some staff members and you play the young guys and you say, I don't care about the results right now. Let's make sure we're drafting at the top of the board. That would make a lot of sense.
Do any of the 3 names that we've thrown out there, Castillo and
I was joking about Juan,
half joking, and Ron Rivera, do any of them have a relationship with Lovie Smith? That's what I would need to know, because when you're trying to lose, you got to lose. And Lovie, shame on him, won that last game last year, which was could have been costful for the Texans. I think they got Stroud, the best player anyway. But if you're going to go tank, you got to go all-out tank. How will that go over with Commanders fans?
Well, it'll go over real well if they're drafting first or second overall next year, and they're going to get one of the two quarterbacks that look like they're, franchise-altering talents. And you don't know, right? I mean, both Caleb Williams and Drake May could flop and could be mistakes. But this team just hasn't had enough bites at the apple at the top of the board, right? I mean, Sam Howell was a fifth-round pick. The one guy that they hit on and found was Kirk Cousins. That was outside of the top 100. That was in the fourth round. But if you actually look at, their attempts, their swings, if you will, getting into the batter's box and taking a rip for QBs, the only time since Heath Schuler in the mid-90s they drafted a quarterback in the top 5 was Robert Griffin. He won Rookie of the Year.
Which was the same year as
Cousins, yeah.
Yeah,
same
exactly.
Year as Cousins.
And Griffin looked like he was on his way potentially to something. Now, that went sideways for a lot of reasons. Everyone just kind of blames the injury, which is a big part of it. The empowerment from Snyder to he and his father and kind of some infighting with the Shanahan regime. There was all kind of that was rotten before it really ended in injury. And I'm not sure how that would have ended even if everyone was healthy. But I say that to say, they didn't completely miss on that pick. I mean, Griffin was an electrifying talent. So if they can get back to the top of the board, that's generally how you have your highest batting average to get this thing right. Doesn't mean it's a slam dunk. Sometimes it's good for a little while and bad, as you guys saw with Carson Wentz. But the best chance to have success is to draft up high. And I think they learned that the hard way. They took Chase Young second overall when they could have gone with Justin Herbert or even Tua Tagovailoa, who bounced back and looked better last year. And I'm sure internally, if you gave him some truth serum, they regret that decision today, as they didn't pick up Chase Young's fifth-year option a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. You had mentioned about the quarterback room. I saw Grant, and I think people have been very harsh because you mentioned Jacoby Brissette isn't a top-tier starter, but he's probably a top 5 backup. And I think you mentioned Sam Howell being a fifth-round pick. Jody and I talk about this all the time: pedigree, pedigree, pedigree. He'll always be a fifth-round pick now. He was once a top 5 potential pick, and things went poorly, and all of a sudden he's forever, he's a fifth-round pick. He can never be anything. One of our frequent guests, Ed Kratz, he's the biggest Sam Howell fan in the world. Any feel is this real? Is the Commander's belief in Sam Howell real, or what we just talked about? And Jody and Josh Harris, as you mentioned, Josh will be willing to tank. Is this about the future, or do they really believe Sam Howell could be a starting quarterback in this league?
No, I think, look, Rivera doesn't get next year if Sam Howell stinks. So, with him, with this group, I think they really believe in Howell. Now, the question is what changed? Why do you go at the end of the year from not thinking he's ready to start to all of a sudden naming him the starter 2 weeks later? I think they were that impressed and that blown away by what he provided and showed in his Week 18 game against Dallas, which is a dangerous way to eval, as you guys know. One game, small sample, 11 completions, 19 attempts. Come on. But they watched him all year. They saw the moxie in practice. They saw some of the things they liked. This is my guess based on connecting some dots. I think their offensive coordinator, Scott Turner, was not a big proponent of playing him. He is a Taylor Heineke guy. He was the only coach in the league that was at Heineke's pro day at Old Dominion. Heineke was with him in Minnesota. Heineke was with him in Carolina. Heineke was with him here. He called and brought Heineke in as a COVID quarterback, and eventually he became a starter here. I think he wanted to go with Heineke. I think he, preferred him and wasn't a big Howell guy. And maybe he was one of the voices in Ron's ear saying, don't go with Sam Howell, when fans wanted to see him late last year. Notice they fired Scott Turner as soon as the season ended, and a few days later named Sam Howell the quarterback. So that is not, while it could be a coincidence, it's not lost on me. I know Marty Herney has very loudly advocated on his behalf all along, has thought highly of him. So I think their intrigue, I'll call it, I don't know if they love him. I think their fixation or their curiosity is real. I think they were smitten by how he played. That's number one. Number two, specific to his skill set, I've got to tell you, I mean, this team has been a tough club to play at times. You guys saw it on Monday Night Football last year with Taylor Heineke, who is not good. Taylor Heineke he misses throws. He lacks arm strength, but I don't want to be disrespectful. I mean, he is a gamer. Players love playing for him. He's got that like Brett Favre-ian, I have fun while I play, aw shucks thing down. And Sam Howell has some of that, like a lot of that. All those faders are probably equal with where they are. You can pot them up the same as with Heineke. But he's got more arm strength. But he's got more mobility. But he's got more foot speed. But he's got more athleticism. And so I say all that to say, if this defense plays like it has the last couple of years, where they were essentially a 500 team when Taylor Heineke played over 2 years, I don't see why he wouldn't be better than Heineke. To me, his floor is what Heineke was when they were a pain in the butt to play and they won a lot of 20-17 games. And I think that's going to be their formula. The big question is they need to protect the football. And with a rookie-type QB in Sam Howell, I think there's a fear he'll turn it over a bunch. Now, I'm here to tell you that Taylor Heineke last year had more turnover-worthy plays and a higher turnover-worthy play percentage on PFF than any quarterback in the league with a minimum of 100 attempts. So I don't think he's going to be worse than Heineke was in that way. But Heineke was very, very lucky, rarely threw interception. I mean, he had more picks dropped than anyone I've ever seen in my life. And I just don't know if it's going to be.
I can't forget that play where the referee ran into the defensive back. It was like a punt, and it ended up being a touchdown.
I'll tell you what, John, that was the epitome of kind of I called it. People got so annoyed by this. I called it the Heineke horseshoe. Like he would just, and it sounds like I don't like the guy. I mean, it was a blast to watch him. It was very much a will over skill kind of operation and a good story. But he would throw these balls that were interceptions out of the hand, and it would be amazing how they just somehow wouldn't be caught. Or he would close his eyes and throw a ball up, and it would be completed for a first down to ice the game. And it's like, I don't understand how this is happening. This defies everything I know about football. But so my point in saying that is maybe Howell doesn't have the same. Sounds funny analytically, but like the luck gene. The horseshoe that Heineke had, and maybe there are more picks that get caught or whatever. But I do think that Sam Howell, he's got a better arm. He's faster. He can run more. I think that's got to be a part of this offense, by the way. I just think he's a better quarterback than what they had last year.
Yeah, by luck, by hook, by crook, he's going to throw more picks than Heineke. I'm guaranteeing it right now. Last thing, Grant, and again, thank you very much for jumping in with us today. Hypothetical. Leading up to the week of the NFL trade deadline, which the NFL has wisely moved back over the years. All three of us have been doing this long enough that we remember when the trade deadline was like end of September. You had like 4 weeks to make up your mind if you wanted to make a trade or not. Now they push it back into the middle of the season, so it has relevancy. Will Chase Young be dealt to another team? Will he be playing for that next contract for the Commanders and stay through the season? Or will he be signed to a contract extension? We were just talking about Patrick Queen, a guy I want to see the Eagles try and go out and get. Third-year rookie, hasn't gotten the fifth-year option picked up. Same thing with Chase Young. How will the Chase Young situation play right up to the trade deadline this year?
Yeah, I think the only way he would get traded is if he becomes a malcontent behind the scenes and kind of wants to force his way out.
And you don't think that's going to happen? He's not that kind of guy.
I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I think they could be annoyed by him and kind of over him. But the lack of production, a lot of barking. This is the path to that. I'm not predicting this. But he just not putting in the work that they want him to. Like I could see that path to them being annoyed. But even then, I think you're not trading him for 40 cents on the dollar or whatever. So what I think is they've tried to motivate him by not picking up this fifth-year option. I think a lot of people around the country were stunned by that. It was the biggest no-brainer ever as far as I'm concerned. His rookie year was good. It was not spectacular. It was very, very solid. He had 7.5 sacks. He won the Rookie of the Year award defensively. But if you look at that year, there were not other quality rookie defenders. The guys that that got votes or were in the vicinity were like Jeremy Chin of the Panthers, who's completely fallen off. You mentioned Patrick Queen, who the Ravens didn't even pick up the 5th-year option of. There's not another year over the last 10 or 11 years that I found when I went back and looked at this where Chase Young would have won Defensive Rookie of the Year. Again, this is not meant to belittle Chase Young. It is just information to say
right.
It was the 2020 pandemic rookie class. It was not a productive rookie class defensively. And he was a great beneficiary of that in a 7.5 sack season, where down the stretch he did make some pretty big impact plays. But in Washington, I think people talked themselves into that year being like this. He's on his way to being Lawrence Taylor, and it just wasn't quite that. The next year, almost immediately, Ron Rivera started talking about maturity, started talking about little things behind the scenes that kind of raise your antenna a little bit. Then there's, Chase Young's not coming to organized team activities. He's not coming to off-season work. He's asked about it in a press conference. He tells a reporter, I was getting my money, boss. That didn't go over well because he was filming commercials and doing things. Now, all of a sudden, that's all fine. Go out there and kick butt. Go get 15 sacks. He had 1.5 sack through 9 games. He had, I think, 3 tackles for loss. He was completely not noticeable and ineffective. And then he tore his ACL, which is not his fault, and you feel bad for the kid. But, whereas maybe you would have finished strong and your numbers would have been respectable, that didn't happen. So that was the end of year 2. Year 3 was last year. The team expected him to be back a handful of weeks into the season, and then thought for about a month straight every week on Wednesday he was going to play on Sunday, and he didn't. And it from what I can gather, based on conversations I've had, it was, and this is a reality. This is legit. But he had a mental block about that knee and getting back on the field, and there was anxiety and nerves, and it's part of the recovery. It's like physical and mental, right? But for about a month, they thought he would play, and then he didn't. And I say all that to tell you, instead of playing 7 or 8 games last season, he played 3 at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And those 3, he didn't look like Chase Young. Now, that's part of the rehab. You just got to get back out there and plant and run and jump. And it doesn't matter if you're productive. It's like pitching and walking people, in the minor leagues before you get back in the show. But the point of all this is for 2 years, he has not been an impactful player. He has been the equivalent of a back of the roster kind of defensive end who's good against the run. And that doesn't get you paid in this league. So they couldn't have picked up that option in good faith.
Nope.
What happens now? They hope that he's terrorized his teams. They hope that he's livid and that he's working his butt off right now. And that a guy who was the face of his draft class and on every billboard in DC and one of the most hyped defensive prospects in years and on national commercials and in campaigns decides that he's taking this personally, and he goes out in a prove-it year to tell them bleep you, and he goes and gets 14.5 sacks, and then they feel like, guess what? He was right. Now what do we do?
Yeah.
Grant Paulsen, we always appreciate whenever you jump in with us. You can catch him on Sirius XM's MLB network on Sunday mornings for minors and majors. That's where I hear Grant most often. Sorry, I don't stream in the DC show, but congrats on winning your time slot. And Johnny Mac gave you props earlier. Let me do the same. Let me ask you now if you will be available to us during the year when the Commanders and Eagles play. You'll come on with us again, won't you, Grant?
Of course, no doubt.
We appreciate you coming on with us today. We'll be asking again for later in the season. Thanks for doing it, big guy.
Thanks, Grant.
You got it. Good talking to you guys.
Grant Paulsen from 106.7 The Fan down in D.C. All right, we're way over. Grant does that. He's just so knowledgeable. And
Grant's awesome, man.
Answers.
Yeah.
He is tremendous whenever he comes on. But we ran a little late, so hopefully you didn't have to be out the door at 10 o'clock. Thanks for staying with us. While you're still here, you get the like button. Johnny Mac, Jody Mac coming back to put a bow in the show.